All right, so first day of macroeconomics. What are we going to talk about? Well, before we can really go any further, we've got to break down what economics is primarily concerned about, and that is something called the scarcity principle. So we know that economics is the study of how people make choices under this condition of scarcity and the result of these choices for society. But this scarcity, what is this talking about? So this scarcity principle describes this underlying condition that we have where we have boundless wants, unlimited, while the resources are limited. And so this usually means that having more of one thing usually means having less of another. And when we're talking about scarcity, it's important to keep in mind that we're talking about things that people actually want, right? So a scarce good is a good that is of limited quantity that people desire, right? We would never talk about pollution as being scarce, right? It's not as if people want more pollution. Sure, there's a limited amount of pollution, but it's not that pollution is meeting any of our unlimited wants and needs, right? So at the end of the day, we have unlimited wants and needs. We have limited resources that are desirable. So scarcity is involved in all sorts of things. You know, it's involved in climate change. It's involved in your career choice. You know, I can't be a neurosurgeon and an economist, right? It's involved in our political elections. A lot of our political elections is about how do we distribute these scarce resources that we produce, right? How do we organize in order to produce those scarce resources, right? Are we unionized or not? What are our rights as workers? What are the rights as employers? All these kind of things ultimately, come down to the reason why they exist is because of scarcity. And even something as simple as buying bottled water. And it's so funny. There's this video I'll start off with class in the next class. That's I think it was like a Vice video or something. It was a gag video, but it was really, really well done. And it was about people illegally purchasing water from people in Canada purchasing water from the United States or something like that. It was like something that's ridiculous, but also like not outside of the realm of possibility in the future. I'll find the exact video. It was definitely one of those things where I had to take like 3 looks at it and like Google it to be like, this isn't real, but it's so, and then I found out like, oh, it's a propaganda piece. Like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so scarcity is one thing. And then when we're making these decisions about scarce goods, we are going to be using a framework called the cost-benefit principle. Let's see here, what color don't I have? cost-benefit principle or analysis. You'll see it discussed a lot of different ways. And so what is cost-benefit principle? This is saying only do something when the, and here's the important part, extra benefits are at least as great and equal to the extra costs. And we fall into a trap all the time when we're talking about costs and benefits, in that we think that costs and benefits are just money. So we have to remember costs and benefits are not just monies. Any questions about scarcity or about costs and benefits? So we do a lot of this already, right? In terms of when we're making purchasing decisions and things like that, right? We only buy something when the extra benefit to us is greater than the cost of it, the extra cost that we'd have to expend that day or that month or whatever the case may be, right? So when we are applying this, we are assuming, so there's a lot of assumptions in economics. Which to somebody just learning economics can be a little frustrating, right? But at the end of the day, all models are toy models, right? We have to hold things constant so that we can make some sort of inferences about if we change this lever, how does that impact the overall flow? Or if we change this condition, how does that impact the stock of something, right? The stock of money, the stock of food, the stock of oil, right? When we talk about gas prices and things like that, right? So we have to make assumptions when we're doing this kind of economic analysis. And when we're doing cost-benefit analysis, the assumption that we're making is that we're making an assumption that all people are rational all the time, right? Which we know is not true. Now, for the most part, on average, most people are rational for most of the time, right? But a lot of the decisions that we end up making, are not necessarily because they're rational. It might just be because your friends are doing it, or because your parents expect you to do it, or whatever the case may be, right? There's a lot of societal influences when we are making all sorts of decisions, economic decisions included. And so when we define a rational person, let's get a lighter blue if we can. There we go. So a rational person, they have well-defined goals and they try to fulfill those goals the best they can. Doesn't mean they always fulfill them, but they're trying, right? So we are asked in the text, it talks about an example. It says, okay, would you walk to town to save $10? You can either get it shipped from Amazon or wherever, or you can go walk to Walmart to save the $10, right? When we're looking at something like this, the benefits are pretty clear. Right? What's the benefit? That's the $10. Very good, yeah. But the difficult part becomes when we have to assign a monetary value to the cost of walking to town or walking to Walmart or dealing with the public and standing in line and all this other kind of stuff, right? So the issue becomes, for something like this, what are those costs to walking to town or Walmart or whatever the case may be? And so there's various ways that we can kind of figure this out in the wild, so to speak, right? So one of the ways that we can figure this out is by running a hypothetical auction. And this is what they do a lot to try to value, how much do people, value parks and other kinds of things like that, right? They give them this hypothetical auction. And so, you would ask yourself, or a researcher would ask you, okay, would you walk to town for $1,000? Pretty sure every single one of us, myself included, would walk to town to save $1,000, right? So then we ask ourselves, okay, well, what about 500? What about 100? What about 50? And so we start to really, get down to the brass tacks, so to speak, in terms of, if you decide for a savings of 25, but not for a savings of 24, then what's your cost of walking? $25. Very good. So there's a lot of different examples of this, coupons and stuff, right? Like they exist for price sensitive consumers. I spent a lot of time in undergrad and grad school, clipping coupons and using the Safeway app and stuff like that, right? But now I don't as much. And now, and you can also think about somebody like Jeff Bezos, right? The richest person in the world, on the planet. He doesn't clip coupons, right? And so it's just not worth his time. There's this whole there's an old economics joke that's not really funny. Most economics jokes are not that funny. But it's two economists walking down the street, and one of them sees a $100 bill, and he goes, "Hey, I think I just saw a $100 bill on the ground there." And the other one goes, "Oh no, that's not possible," because essentially it's like if it was there, somebody else would have already got it. And then also, like, is it worth Jeff Bezos's time to pick up and to bend over and pick up a $100 bill, given that like his per second income is more than $100, right? And so I think about this sometimes when I pick up, pennies or something like that, right? You know what I mean? Like we're just like used to it, but like, is it actually worth your time to pick up that penny? Like in terms of your opportunity cost, what you could be doing instead. So the book also gives this example about, you speed on the way to work, but not the way to school. Which I don't see that a lot, but you know what I do see? I see people that speed all the time for themselves, but then when you're in a rush, they go exactly the speed limit, right? So there's cost benefit, right? The benefit for them, the benefit for you for speeding on the way to work is that, you're going to get paid more and you might not get fired, whereas the benefit for speeding on your way to school is not as great, right? Especially my class. I'm not going to get upset if you guys are late to the class. Definitely come late rather than not come at all. I know that's always an issue, and you're like, oh, should I like come like 15 minutes late? Is that rude? Just come to class. Don't make a big like thing about it, but just come to class. So when we're in captive audiences, right? So when we're, at Disney World or at, a sports game or something like that, right? We end up paying a lot more for that good than in a normal time, right? And that's just the benefit at the time is greater than whatever that elevated cost is, because you can't leave the venue and come back, and so you're kind of stuck there, and you're thirsty or you're hungry, and so you're going to want to do it. Okay, new topic. Economic surplus. So economic surplus it's essentially the extra benefits left over after you pay the costs. So it's just whatever is, the benefits minus the costs. So if there's a saving of buying a PlayStation 5 of $200 by walking to Walmart, you know, and the value of me walking to Walmart is only $25, then I'm going to go ahead and do it. And my economic surplus of that is the $200 minus 25, $175. So I'd have $175 of economic surplus because of that action that I did. So another interesting, vital, somewhat confusing word that we're going to hear a lot, or term that we're going to hear a lot, is opportunity cost. So opportunity costs is a very important term in all economics classes, but especially in macro. So this is the value of what must be foregone in order to undertake an activity. So in other words, this is what you give up when you are making some sort of choice. And it's important for us to remember that when we're dealing in opportunity costs, they equal not just what we call the explicit costs. And I know most of you are like, explicit? Like, I know like explicit warnings on albums or other stuff. What are you talking about explicit costs? So explicit means these are costs that you like are straight up, like you had to pay for it with a credit card, you had to write a check, you had to give somebody cash. Like these are real, like legitimate, real world costs, like rent, electricity, wages, all that other kind of stuff. The other kind of costs are what's called implicit costs. And this implicit cost is the value of what you could have done. Like, so let's say that I am running let's say that I quit this job and I run some incubator, or I run some business or plumbing business or whatever the case may be, right? The implicit cost that I would have would be the wages that I gave up in order to run that business. Does that make sense? So the implicit costs are the next best thing. So like your explicit cost for this class is your tuition, right? It's the cost of gas in order to get to school today, right? The implicit cost is what's the next best thing that you could be doing with your time right now. Like you could be relaxing and watching Netflix. You could be working. You could be spending time with your family. You could be improving yourself in some other way, but playing an instrument or writing or whatever the case may be, right? So it's that's something that we have to keep in mind when we're making economic decisions. And a lot of time we only think about these explicit costs, right? And that's a big mistake. We have to think about both of them. So an example of this would be giving up an hour of dog walking, right, where you could be making money, to go to the movies. Now, it's really important that we remember that this is not the combined activities. An opportunity cost considers only your next best alternative. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so last last thing, and then we'll pick up with the decision pitfalls on Wednesday. And I've already kind of talked about this, but one thing I've learned is that if you talk about stuff but you don't write it down, it doesn't get in the students' notebooks. You got to write it down. If I write stuff down, you write stuff down. That's the way it works, right? So when we talk about economic models, we always have simplifying assumptions. We have to figure out which aspects are relevant and which are irrelevant. And the ones that are irrelevant, those are the ones that we're going to hold constant / assume away. The ones that are relevant, that's the key driver of the model. That's we're trying to figure out, what does pulling this lever do? Oh, gas prices go up. Shit. Okay, what does pulling this lever do? Oh, gas prices go down, right? And so we're trying to figure out what's the relevant mechanism whereby that lever is doing that economic thing. And so are we going to, so one of my favorite sites that we'll go to real quick, maybe. I'll do it on the other. So I'll put a link to it. I'm not going to do it on this video. So we're going to stop this video right now. See you guys Wednesday.